Yo guys, and welcome back to another sport creation video and the third of the weekly community plushie raffles. Congratulations to Dragon Gamer and their character Talnova. So this is a really cool design. It's a dragon, which I'm always really happy and very eager to do. A bipedal one, which actually reminds me a lot of the dragon characters from the Spyro games. And like I said, I had a really fun time working on this. I'm really happy with how it came out in the end, although I have to admit it was a little bit trickier than usual to get to that process. I think it mainly stemmed down to me overthinking a few things, particularly the hands and the feet. So with the legs, as you can currently see, the feet are actually an extension of the legs, a bit of a trick I use every now and then to have like a very long shin slash foot, that entire lower segment of some carnivore legs. I tried to go with that whole approach there. And like I said, really went back and forth. I kind of overcomplicated it quite a bit. I used the unshackled part to turn the leg into an actual foot. I tried a whole array of different parts. I was also mishmashing between different hands and feet, textureless ones, trying to have a combination of it being accurate to the original design, since Talnova has, from what I've seen, 3 digits on the feet and 4 digits on the hands. However, there aren't very many hands that have 4 digits in sport that all look good and have the same kind of, design as the artwork. And in the end, like I said, I utterly overthought it, and I ended up scrapping the majority of it and using my usual techniques for these plushie creations by simply using the textureless creepy and cute foot, made it very small, and stuck a couple of the coloured spheres and some ethereal razors as claws for the feet. And then for the hands, I settled with one of the blue Dark Injections hands, textures once again, so it inherit the colour scheme from the base of the creature. Now that is a hand that is normally a bit too complicated, or mostly a little bit too sharp for a plushie creation. Since I mentioned before, I try to use rounder parts and try to avoid the more detailed ones. I made an exception here because due to the shape of it, I figured it was still simple enough that it can get away with it. It could just look like the plushie had been, sewn into a point. And in the end, I think it worked. It did lack one of the 4 digits of the creature's hands or fingers, but I think, it's a fair enough sacrifice. Now, moving on from the hands and the feet, the rest of the creation did end up being very straightforward and, like I said, very enjoyable. I had a lot of fun with the tail, trying to make it very long, quite flexible with a little curve at the end of it, and that was quite fun to detail later on. The head is the exact same approach it has been every other time, and the wings are quite simplistic, despite the artwork having a much more in-depth and rather very cool looking set of wings. Again, it's a plushie, I had to really simplify it, although I did end up adding some fingers to the membrane, although as you'll see later on in the video, I have rather mixed feelings on that due to animation. But to pure aesthetics, I think it looks fantastic, and I'm really happy with it. What was another really nice touch about this creature is the colour scheme. So while I do very much enjoy making big, bold, bright colour schemes, this one's very consistent. It was a overall bluish grey body with a beige, yellow, greyish kind of underbelly, membrane, scoops, etc. And then the hair and the mane going along down the back and the tail were all grey. So like I said, very consistent. And the lower or smaller colour palette meant I was able to make the creation, again, very consistent, which is very pleasing to look at towards the end. As you can see right now, I have the same green sphere for the membranes of the wings, as well as going down the neck, chest, stomach, all the way down to the tip of the tail, following the entire curvature of the tail meanwhile. And again, everything just looking very nice and neat, very pleasing. I'll have the same parts on the arms and legs as well for the scutes, or the additional bit of armor plating or scaling. And yeah, it'll all be the same colour. It's the same technique again, going down the back into the tail for the hair as well. That'll just be a grey though, as opposed to this green one, which will inherit the coat, I believe. And what this does is that it gives me the freedom to use the detail colour purely for what I want. So in this scenario, I didn't use it for any parts, I used it entirely for the textures alone. I was able to give the blue body a bit of a darker shade of blue underneath, and just gave it a little bit more depth, a little bit more variation to the general colour scheme. Whereas normally, I end up having to use both of the detail and the colour coats for other purposes. Now like I said, the face, same old technique, always happy with it. I tried to make the eyes a little bit smaller. I really wanted to make them very large and cartoonish like I had been with the other ones, but that wouldn't have reflected the original design quite as well, so I had to keep it as is. Although I did add a bit of a bonus feature And I was using some textureless ethereal razors for the snout and the chin, just to give it ever so slightly more definition, while still being very simplistic. It's barely noticeable in the final creation itself, but it's a very nice little small subtle addition. Now, as expected, when it came to the technique I used for the neck and the chest, I did have a bit of an issue while animating, where the plates would kind of separate and they would have this really gross black shadowy glitch, as we've seen so many times before. So for that I had to try and squeeze in an additional colour sphere in between, and I think it looks quite okay. It looks a little bit cluttered, but given that it's meant to be fixing the shadowy glitch, I think it's quite okay. And then of course we have the horns and the facial frills. Now the horns, once again, same colour as the membrane and the scutes, so again, just really nice and consistent. Although I had to be very careful in making the horns actually look physically different than the membrane on the back of the jaw. Fortunately for this scenario, I was able to actually use some textureless nail downs, as I used them at the base of the horns to make it look like it really is partially in the skull. And again, it's just like a very subtle thing that helped differentiate the two, and again just makes you see the difference between, okay, well, those are horns and those are frills. And then we come to the final creation. Like I said, I don't know what it is about it, it just looks so pleasing. It just looks very finished, very polished. I really think it's the colour scheme. Something about the colour palette is just really pleasing, and as I said, I'm just really happy with how it came out. But you can see what I meant about the wings. The wings I am really conflicted over, because on the one hand, when the creature is stood still and not animating, I think the wings look utterly fantastic. I think they really reflect the original artwork, as well as just generally looking good. It like separates the membranes without being too complicated, looks very, very plausible for a plushie, again, just very neat. But then as soon as it animates, Spore shows his ugly head. It just go all over the place, and as far as I'm aware, there's no way I can really fix it. What I could have done is made just a large, very, very solid, non-animating object, but then I wouldn't have the limbs to do that with, and it wouldn't have, you know, the same pretty texture. It would just look very, very blocky. Alternatively, I could have just not added the fingers at all to the wings. They could have just been pure membrane, but I think that would have, you know, kind of detracted quite away from it, because in the actual artwork, the fingers are like very emphasised, like proper bat wings basically, very nice, strong, bold bat wings. And without that, I think it would have been a bit of a loss. As mentioned, overall, extremely happy, really pleased to work with this, and as always, I hope that Dragon Gamer enjoys it as well. And just like last time everyone, if you want your own character to be made into our plushie, please throw your links down in the comment section down below. Every link is an entry, just have fun with it, no rules, just be nice, be fair, etc. And I will randomly choose another one for next week's raffle. As always, the best of luck, and I'll catch you all next time. Cheers!